Record.
I have a disc you could use too for music,
A
but
disc
not
for
with me right
music.
now.
Okay. Is it what kind of music is it?
Autumn.
Autumn music.
Yeah.
Well, and speaking of autumn, let me turn the volume down. Maybe you could introduce yourself
Okay.
here.
My name is Ophelia Reves. I'm Uya from Autumn territory in Arizona and Mexico.
And what organizations are you working with?
I'm with the Autumn Voice Against the Wall, just a grassroots organization of Autumn elders and ceremony people and youth. And I also am representing. I'm
There
also.
went my great poster just dissolved. So
I'm
much
also
for my high technology press. Oh well. So, here we go.
I'm also representing the traditional Autumn leaders from the border communities along the U.S.-Mexico border communities of Autumn.
And for those that don't know, maybe you could give us a quick update as to what are the issues and what is the relationship between your tribe or nation or organizations?
Yes, the vast lands of Autumn consist of now in two countries. The international border divided our lands into two countries. The Tohono Nation, which is the reservation, is in the United States in the southwest in the Sonoran Desert, and but there's also communities on the Sonoran Mexican side, which is the northern part of Mexico, and is called our Southern Territory. We have people that are living on both sides of this border that was created and we weren't consulted, and of course, and one of the things that's happening right now is that there's a lot of abuse of Autumn by the border patrols, and the people that are crossing through traditional routes are always interrogated, and now they're starting to beat the people, and it may have done some serious injuries to individuals. So those are the things that Autumn Voice Against the Wall is working on now, trying to document those abuses.
And what about, besides the personal abuse, the fact that you have, like you say, the boundary passed over us, we didn't pass the boundary, however that phrase goes, and the fact that now there's a wall, the interspecies relationship issues, maybe you could speak to that a little bit about how the wall is actually...
When they started building this wall, the first document that came out of Washington was in 2003 that said that they were going to build a wall similar to the Berlin Wall, which would consist of one huge wall and roads on both sides of it with stadium lights and scientific, whatever it's called, security kind of measures. So it ended up with our protest in Washington to at least keep our traditional routes open. What it ended up being is what they call a vehicle barrier. It's metal pillars filled with concrete driven into the land, 5 feet and about 8 to 10 feet on top, and they sometimes would also build what they call pedestrian fence. These pedestrian fence and also the vehicle barrier have metal rods going across that prevent not only just people in certain places from crossing, but also all the animals that are in the desert. When they built this, we talked with the elders and trying to describe it in a way that they would understand what was happening to the land and what was happening to the border. And so one of the elders said, they ask us for papers all the time when we cross this border. Are they going to stop the wind and ask it for documents? Are they going to stop the rainwater flowing through there and ask it for documents. I mean, the whole idea or the whole thing about the border is that they want to stop terrorism from coming into America, and that these fences and borders and walls are a means to secure Americans from terrorists. I guess we're considered terrorists because we happen to live on both sides of this border, and we cross this border all the time. We go to ceremonies, we go to visit our families that are on both sides of the border, and we also, have a lot of things that that are related to. I do want to talk about. Sometimes I'm kind of reluctant to talk about their ceremony issues that have certain materials that we gather on both sides of this border, and those are the things that really impact our way of life, which is called the himidag. When we don't have these things to maintain who we are as Autumn, then it disrupts our way of life. And absolutely, this wall has disrupted our way of life. We are, along with the animals and the plants and everything else that is impacted along the border. When they first started building it, they were making trenches, and they came across a sacred burial place, and instead of stopping, they proceeded to disrupt that place. They removed our people and put them in little boxes and put them in a room. First we were told that it wasn't. They weren't our relatives because we didn't know. We didn't know people that were 12,000 years old. And it was just one of those same cycles of I guess it's called assimilation. Our own tribal people, the government said that there's a protocol to taking these remains and how to rebury them. So our cultural committee from the district of which is Guwa district, and the elders and the ceremony people got together, and they said, we have never in our history of Autumn have never removed human remains, so there is no certain way to rebury them. So we received our people back, and we did rebury them. And we asked for blessing rains, and they came and blessed the area and removed all signs that they were ever disturbed. So.
Well, one of the things that got me when I was at Brownsville, Texas, where we were going to an event that was the border on. We had to cross their border crossing.
Yes.
To get over to where this place was, and the lights. Besides the harassment that goes on continually, I was amazed at the lights that burn all night long, and how that disrupts the birds and the insects and all the animals, because it's like the lights that they use when they're doing road construction. I mean, it's brighter than daylight.
Yeah, it really altered a lot of not just human life but animal life. Some of the rare species that normally are in certain parts of the region where we're at shifted. There's the endangered species of the spotted leopard that's out there, and we actually had a sighting. We saw it near our area, which has never traveled that far. We know that it's there, but we know that it had a certain region that it stayed in. And so, yes, it's very disruptive. Not just that, but the noise and the haphazardness of these agents. They call them agents, that they feel that they have a full range of our lands, and they run over baby cactuses that are protected. They run over all kinds of animals and disrupt the entire land, where certain areas are now like eroding because of their abuse. And not just that, but when we have ceremony, we do a ceremonial hunt, and at those times we do not hunt before, and we try to protect that area that the people are hunting. and the border patrol were informed of this, and instead of respecting our wishes, they flew helicopters the day of the ceremony, the day before the ceremony, and disrupted the deer that we were hunting, so we were not able to get a deer. And the next village, the men that were out hunting were surrounded by the border patrol. They were unarmed. They disarmed them because they had their weapons to go shoot deer, and so they took their weapons and kind of contained them until somebody, whatever of authority, maybe the tribal government, whatever, came and said, well, these guys are traditional hunters. So that year, that community didn't do their ceremony because they have to have the ceremony deer to be a part of that ceremony.
Occupied territory.
Absolutely occupied territories.
Yeah.
It's totally militarized with many, many agents, federal agents on our lands.
And the dog pens. For folks that haven't been down there, it's probably one of the most despicable, kind of sad things you'll ever see is people in these cages that they round up until they get enough of them to bus them to a tent prison somewhere or some prison that you, the taxpayer, are paying more than it would cost to stay at the Hilton Hotel. You're paying to have some local indigenous folks sit in a tent or less.
And these the tribal government has collaborated with the Department of Homeland Security in order for these detention places to be on the reservation. They absolutely did collaborate with them, and it's against. It's a violation of our way of life. Our way of life is that we regard everything, in special regard as a sacred thing, and every person that comes through our land, we welcome them and we help them any way we can. But the people that are coming across are hungry. They're poor. They've been out in the land walking for days just so they could try to find a job in the United States, because their homelands are impacted by not only this where we're at now, the climate change that disrupt their corn growing seasons because it's not raining anymore. There's droughts, but also the government, that the government is planting genetic modified seeds in their territory, disrupting their original corns, especially in Chiapas. So, coming across the lands, a lot of people have died on the lands. Last couple of years, there was over 281 people that are indigenous people coming from Guatemala or El Salvador or, Colombia or even just right next state over in Durango or Sinaloa, because they're all looking for work. If you were under these conditions, I think you would be forced to move somewhere to try to look for work so you could feed your family. That's why these people are coming across and just dying needlessly, and the inhumane policies of the United States is that they're considered aliens. I have no idea what this word means. They're human beings. They're from nations, and they have cultures, and the United States government calls them aliens, and also undocumented people and migrants. These people that are coming across, if they get tired, they'll call the Border Patrol. They'll flag down a Border Patrol. They'll get arrested. They'll sit in the cage, which is a fenced area. And in our lands, it gets really hot, 115, 120 degrees outside. They're sitting outside. They're not given water. They're not given food until there's over 200 people that a bus, Wackenhut bus, can come and pick them up and then take them to Tucson or a station where they're processed. During the processing, they're not given water. They're not given any food. The women sometimes are not allowed to go to the bathrooms, and they're all sitting in one area, confined, and sometimes they're processed and they're released. And what the horror stories that you hear about people, sometimes just in their underwear, for who knows what reason they ask them to take their clothes off, just in their underwear, are released at the border in Nogales, and then they walk across the border in that condition with none of their personal possessions, no clothing, no food, nothing. Women, children, and elders, and people. So these policies that are enforced in the United States on this border issue is it's just unreal. I so many countries. I have to drink some water.
And you're listening to www.worthcycles.net. We're here with Ophelia Reves in Bolivia, speaking about the border issues. There's so many things to talk about because we wanted to get to why you're here in Bolivia as well, and where you've been as well in Chiapas in Mexico. It's such an incredible, everyone has so much to do in terms of all of this. And it seems like what needs to be done first is some respect. It's a phenomenal, the story that you were just relating is sort of indicative of our lack of respect for each other as human beings, as well as the earth itself.
Yes.
And, you look at the profit issue with, $68 billion or something that goes to the Boeing folks, and it's a Israeli company that's building the wall.
Yes, they are.
It's kind of fun. It's just incredible that the war machine is just moving right along.
Yes,
And
it is.
And it's so actions. One of the things is what do you think about actions? What can people do that are listening that can contribute from wherever they are to kind of bring some civilized mindset to this incredibly hostile, occupied territory?
I travel a lot, and every time that I tell my story, people are just so appalled, and they don't realize that this is happening in what is called America, the land of the free, and all these freedoms that we're supposed to have, but if you're indigenous, that doesn't apply to you. I mean, there's so many nations on what is called America, and not just North America, but Central America, South America, and all of these things are happening to everyone across the world. I'm here in Bolivia to observe and listen to what's happening, because in the Sonoran Desert, there's a change in our climate. There's a change that we've been getting so much rain that it's not normal in our area, and it's much greener. And we recently saw a cactus that was different. And my grandson said mutation. Actually, it's adaptation. It's adapting to what's happening to the lands. And a couple of years ago, one of the trees bore fruit seeds twice, which is very unusual. So these things are happening not just because the glaciers have melted and the water is rising. A couple of weeks ago, we had an earthquake that shook the village, and it happened very close to us. And those are the kind of things that I can only speak from a traditional point of view, that when we don't have balance on the lands, and we don't do the things as the people that we should be doing, our ceremonies, our songs, and respect to the Mother Earth, which is one of our principles as human beings, then these things will occur. That in autumn stories, we have lived in, this is the fourth world that we have lived in, and all the worlds there's a prophecy of the next world. Well, in this world, there is no prophecy for the next world. So what does that tell you?
Well, what does that tell
It
you?
it tells me that all these changing, it means cleansing. It's a cleansing of the entire system of what is here now. What we think is the earth and what we think is the moon. It's entirety of creation is ready for a cleansing, and I think it's due. I mean, we have not abided by our directives as human beings. We have directives how to exist on this land and live in balance with all of creation, and we have not done that. So yes, I'm definitely ready for the cleansing.
And ready for the cleansing. What does that imply? What would you say for someone who was saying that there is a cleansing? How would you get ready for the cleansing?
I think that at this point, when, like I said, when the glaciers are melting, the all these natural, they call it natural catastrophes are happening. It's changing the entire world. What can you do that you haven't done? What can you do? I don't have an advice for the people. Some people believe in a higher creation and they pray to that higher creation. Some people are learning how to survive, without electricity and water and those kind of things that might be a part of this cleansing. I believe when the cleansing happens, it's going to be entirety, and we are not going to have these options available to us.
Well, that sort of correlates with my sort of vision of and recognizing who it is that we are. I think that's one of the problems that a lot of people have is they think they are their bodies,
Yes.
and so they get
Yes.
lost in the externalization of their sensory perceptions and identify with things outside of their skin.
Yes.
And so it gets to be a little complicated for some of those people in terms of wanting an answer.
Yes, I understand that, and for myself, I've lived my life according to the hymn that I've gone to the ceremonies, I've done my ceremonies, I've learned the songs, I speak my language, I've tried to live in a way that I don't leave any mark on this land. And that's my way of life. I mean, that's how I understand my way of life. If people are consuming so much that they are, they're in excess, I think that that's one of the situations that's causing these problems. Everybody has gotten so greedy, and they can't just, why can't we just grow our own food and exist in our own food? But, that's how society has become. It becomes a commodity of sorts.
And so it may be, in terms of survival, it's what you don't do that might help you
Absolutely. Absolutely.
disengage.
With this here in Bolivia, with the climate change, we're talking about things of, especially like the REDs, these emission credits that people are talking about. I mean, there's so many borders, and we are regulated by these borders to have documents as we cross these borders. But governments can just wipe away their big, indiscretions of emissions and just go and plant a plot of something that's not even indigenous in a whole different country and get credits for all the crap that they spew out of these industrial in this industries, the world.
If you're not familiar with the REDs, do check out www.ienearth.org, and I'm sure on there you'll find some information about REDs. It's really important right now for a mobilization of folks, and with this event here specifically, to see that carbon trading is not a solution to anything. It's just the commodification of the air itself, and another way to steal the land of other people with this carbon sequestration allocation scenarios that that go
Yeah.
on. So I think it's really critical at this very moment that there be some kind of mobilization around Red's issue and become familiar with the whole concept of cap and trade scenarios where you can buy indulgences as if it was the 16th century, and like the church would do, and you can pay for your sins in cash.
Yes, and especially the United States can continue to emit so much pollution and not have to be limited because of this new idea.
All right. Well, there's lots of folks here at the
Yes.
this event, and maybe you could go into it a little bit about specifically the what is the working group that you were
Yes.
part of, and what has transpired, and what's going on with that.
In the past couple of days, I was nominated along with Manny Pino, representing English-speaking folks, and as the chairs of the Indigenous Working Group. So in that group, we listened to a great number of people concerned about the rights of Mother Earth. Rights of Mother Earth can be interpreted in so many ways, but the bottom line is that that's how we're going to survive if we protect Mother Earth and everything that entails what Mother Earth is to the, I was pressing the idea of let's define what Mother Earth is. What is Mother Earth? And in the local community, it's called Pachamama, which is the definition of what is above, what is here, and what is below. So that kind of encompasses what Mother Earth is, because absolutely, Mother Earth is also, we have the water that it's underneath Mother Earth and what grows from Mother Earth, and also the land and the plants, and as well as the sky. So it encompasses everything. We're listened to the people and have drafted 17 different concerns regarding the draft. I mean the declaration, which is going to become a part of the main document of this whole summit. Right now, I'm just thinking about the woman that said, trying to describe Mother Earth. She said it's like our body, our veins and our blood that flows are the rivers of Mother Earth that you see here, And she was describing, in order for people to try to understand, and then we were saying, but as Indigenous people, as us people that are here now, we do understand Mother Earth. We need to write a document that explains to the people that don't understand what Mother Earth is and why we need to stand up for Mother Earth and protect Mother Earth. There's a lot of different words that can be used to protect, to use language to protect. So we met as a group and trying to produce a document, not only that describes, not only describes what happened in Copenhagen, where none of the indigenous issues were addressed. There's continuing, Obama went there, and the next day he allowed, more, drilling in Alaska, and those are the kind of things that people came and they talked with their heart, describing what we should add in. And it was a difficult task. It's a very difficult task to produce a document that tries to include all the concerns of the people. And there was hundreds of people.
Hundreds. I think that's an understatement. There are thousands of people.
Yes. Well, that was just in the working group. That's only what the room could,
Well,
yes.
I heard yesterday that they were opening up the windows and throwing the chairs out the windows so there'd be more room for people because it was because there is a lot of concern.
Yes, there is a lot of concern.
And with concern comes planning. What they
Yes.
say about planning. It often works better if done beforehand.
Yes, yes, and we're here in Bolivia. It's a land that, if Evo Morales, he just now came into presidency, that we were hoping with the distribution of funds, maybe he could have organized it better. And I'm very grateful to be here, and that we actually were invited. We felt like we're treated like we have been invited here. We have not been mistreated. But in organizing, there was a lot of technical things that were kind of left out. There was no translation for the English-speaking or other language-speaking people, or written documents of the draft that people could readily, read for themselves and be able to participate. That was the very difficult thing. Not Spanish speaking and not clearly understanding, as an English speaker, how the language was going to be comprised and include everything that was talked about. So that was those are the things that we faced in that group trying to produce this document.
Well as the intensity. So we have the language issue, the cultural, because there are people from everywhere here, except maybe England. From the volcanoes kind of limited participation of that sector.
True.
But I hear that, volcanoes are excellent for cooling down the planet.
Yes.
So it's kind of a fascinating dialogue dilemma that we're in these days.
Yes.
So maybe at some point we're going to get Manny to jump in here. And
Manny was also a part of the working group, one of the chairs of the working group.
And we want to talk a little bit about the specifics. Maybe we'll let Manny give us a sort of overview of what his insights were, and then maybe we can break up the specific points. And once again, what was the working group?
The Indigenous Working Group.
Just the Indigenous Working Group. And do you
the-
happen to know the names of the other working groups? Manny probably does.
No, I don't have.
Right, because there's
there's
17 or
7,
18
yes.
Working groups, and the thing is the time frame. It's
Very
a
short time
very short time frame. A lot of people that want to speak and participate, I don't know. There's over probably 10,000 people here.
I would think so. There's quite a lot of people.
Right. I heard that there were about 15,000 registered, but I'm not quite sure how many actually showed up. And how that went. But the point about that is that there are a lot of folks here that made a commitment to participate in this epic moment where Indigenous consciousness, vision, intention, sort of an insight into the cosmology of traditional knowledge is coming to the international arena.
Yes.
And I think that's and it's going to be an interesting struggle. I think REDS is going to be kind of an indicator as to how much consensus there is if you want to survive or not. I think when we were talking about survival earlier, and individual survival depends on the fact whether the Earth survives in its own way. So it becomes incumbent to creek restoration, street. One thing you can do is don't buy any more plastic bottles or cups. Bring your own cup, bring your own bag. We're working on a new thing. Well, it's not a new thing, zero waste. It's an old thing, but a new handshake. Let's see if I can do this. Okay, you see that right there? There's the zero from the
Yes.
O and the W. Okay, so the new handshake is zero waste. Okay, so when you, then you'll know that you've been in Bolivia. You say
Yes.
zero waste.
Zero waste. Yes, during the inauguration, Evo came out and brought, the clay bowl and just told the people, about the plastics and it was he made a good point. I mean, that's what the people want to hear. We want to hear, and we want to live those philosophies. It starts right there. We were at our meeting and last one leaving, and sat there and actually looked around the room as we were leaving, and we were saying, this kind of philosophy actually, you really can start from here. People didn't pick up their plastic bottles; they left them laying on the floor, and somebody else had to come and do that. And when you're at home, don't throw stuff out the side of as you're going down the road. I see that all the time at home, bottles and plastics along the sides of the roads. I mean, that's the whole idea. If you want to do something locally, that's what you can do at home. You can recycle, not use certain things.
Yeah, well, I think that's it, is do something, action. It's time to, there's two parts to this. There's things that you can do and there's things that you need to stop doing.
Yes,
So one is to stop buying plastic or using anything. Bring your own cup. And I think one of the things that we would like to see is a events bag, or develop your own. And if you have a really great idea of an events bag, give us a couple pictures and send them to Govinda at www.earthcycles.net, and we'll start highlighting, because there are a lot of events, a lot of things happening, and we need to have a bag or something that has your own cup, it has your own plate, and all of those little things that you need. The amount of plastic that comes from every event that I've been in is despicable. So we need to really work on changing that whole concept. But
Our friend Michelle Cook that just arrived, she also sat and helped me in the working group. A very strong woman that really pressed for certain information, certain things that needed to be added into the document.
Well, I remember the first time that I met Michelle. It was at the Border Summit in. We'll just pull the mic over this way, and and that was a few years ago when we were down in the Odom territories and looking at some of the outrageous impacts that were happening and a mobilization to sort of deal with them. And there was a proclamation that was kind of put together. And do you remember exactly what all of that said and where it went? Or maybe you could introduce yourself first.
Michelle Cook initiate. My name's Michelle Cook. I'm born of the Walkaround clan. My father is Scot-Irish. And I'm here at this important meeting helping my sister Ophelia Reves and other people. It's been a wonderful meeting thus far. Really excited to see what conclusions the delegations come to. It's going to be really good to see all the work when it is manifested tomorrow.
Well, I was speaking specifically about what a few years ago when the Border Summit was happening. Do you remember some of the ideas that sort of came out of that, and sort of the relevancy of the human rights issues and how climate change and border issues? What's your sense of
Well, as far as the Border Summit was concerned, that was just an avenue to build awareness around some of the issues that are happening to our brothers and sisters whose traditional lands are on the border. And I think it's very important that other Indigenous people stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters whose land has been militarized by the United States government and Mexican government, the Border Patrol, and the harassment and the violence that they face. I think it's very important that we, as Indigenous peoples in the Americas, stand with them, provide places where our brothers and sisters can give us testimonies and to tell us what's happening. And really to that place, the meeting you were talking about, the Border Summit, was basically to provide an avenue to hear that voice in particular. My role in that was just merely a facilitation role. So that's basically what I was doing, is trying to provide that space for my brothers and sisters.
Right, and it's interesting that these gatherings, the indigenous communities have been meeting and doing these various kind of events to try to mobilize some kind of consciousness and action to make something happen for a long time.
Yes.
So, in this particular experience, what was your role? You said I'm looking at trying to adjust another microphone simultaneously while I talk. I am not a multitasker. So, in this experience, what were you involved in?
Mostly what I've been involved with in this meeting is just helping brothers and sisters, helping Ophelia in whatever way I can. Sometimes you don't always play the front, the leading role. Sometimes, right. You need to be there to support people. And I think that's equally important, because you don't, the show doesn't happen with just the actors. You need everybody to help each other, So I didn't necessarily, I think in this meeting, play a lead role necessarily. I helped where I could.
I'm sure you did a lot more than you're letting on to. Well, we'll just let that go for now. And tell me a little bit about what your assessment of the gathering is and the final document that you guys put together.
I think, obviously there's time constraints. So, of course, the document could have been better, in my opinion. I always think, if we have more time, more funding, if we can keep our delegates here a little longer, we produce better work. Considering the time, we did produce something that I think Indigenous people will be proud of, or at least I hope so. I think really what I've learned from this experience is that if we are going to take a united stand as people against climate change and for the rights of Mother Earth, we're really going to have to, as a movement, work through a lot of issues that I think happen internally within the movement, so that we can kind of check the egos at the door, if you will, and work together. So I think really, to me, the most important thing that I've come out of this meeting is that yes, we have all of these peoples here, but we really need to do what we can to work together, to take the stand together, because no one else is going to do it for us. I don't have that much confidence in the state. I'm not going to say that they're not, that they couldn't be helpful, that the state or officials couldn't help solve climate change or the various issues in the world, but I think that it's going to be us who are going to provide those solutions. So we have to be able to work together across generations, across genders, across sexualities, across nations. I think if we're going to achieve those goals, we really have to think about how we organize and mobilize this movement.
Well, I think you bring up a really important point in that conflict resolution. First, you have to decide that you want resolution, because some conflicts are people live in the perpetual buzz that they get from the conflict. but also it brings conflict resolution, brings you also back into your own central. I think that's the thing that I'm getting out of this conference is that if there's going to be a macrocosm transformation, it also has to be a microcosm transformation.
And absolutely. And I think that um, without the personal transformation and liberation from oppression, we're not going to see the collective change that we need to. So the collective change that needs to happen starts from within, in our own hearts and with our own bodies, and how we treat one another, how we respect one another in our everyday lives. Because, it's be the change that you want to see in the world. If we are going to create a better world, we have to be the agents of peace. We have to embody the principles of peace and respect and dignity in how we walk and treat everyone. And without this, then we're just, we're not doing the personal transformative work that is required to shift the paradigm from domination to harmony.
Well, and that brings it into the full spectrum, because you're looking at your own personal transformation, and then you're looking at the things that you need to do and the things that you need to stop doing, and then how do we actually the community? How do we actually reestablish our sense of community? And the checking the egos at the door kind of thing is to recognize that we're all in it together. And that's a real different thing for folks in the United States that has really focused on individualization and to make you feel separated, unique, and all of those things, where I think if with just a moment's reflection, you would know that you are unique no matter what happens.
Yeah. We're unique, and we're also very similar. I mean, I think one of the most important lessons I've learned this year as a human being is that, every single person, you can't judge anybody. We all face our own sorts of oppression, and I think that what's most important is that we find, how we're similar. Trying to work across communities again, like I told you, trying to find solidarity between indigenous rights, trying to find solidarity with migrant populations, trying to find solidarity with gay and transgender communities, trying to find solidarity with the workers.
Yes, social justice, environmentalism. It's kind of fascinating too. And what I appreciate about this particular event is that the indigenous folks have sort of taken a lead or brought to the forefront of a given direction. I think I guess the stories that I heard, it was always that the indigenous traditional knowledge base was going to actually be that which sort of led the folks out of the darkness.
Absolutely. I think it's quite ironic that, for so long indigenous peoples have been called savages, have been called primitive, but now finally after all of these, 500 and some years of colonization, indigenous peoples are going to be the one that the world looks to find some kind of direction in this time of crisis. Because like you said, indigenous people still possess the traditional knowledge of sustainability, the traditional knowledge of the spiritual traditional knowledge, which I think is most important, because indigenous peoples have access through the spiritual practices, power. A power that is much more transformative than any nation state. And if all human beings can learn how to tap into the spiritual world and power that is available to every human being, then we will see the meaningful change that we need to see.
And I think part of that, it's like the turtle that pulls its legs into its shell, is that, the world of the sensory world outside of there, with all the frilly doomiflachies and everything that you can have and stimulation, is it's to sort of sort of let go of all that and sort of withdraw yourself into your own mind being. And what's really funny about that is that as you move into yourself, you begin to see other people clearer, which is the whole tantric kind of mechanism of power.
Yeah, it's the spiritual practice that you find all over the world in all of the ancient cultures. This is indigenous people share this with, the traditions of India, share it with the traditions of China and Asia, all over the world. There are people who have access to that, and so that's that true, real power, which is not based on domination or exploitation of anyone or any other living thing, and that's only part of the ancient wisdom that indigenous people have that can help humanity change and become better. But it's not the only area that indigenous peoples can contribute.
But I certainly think it's a great foundation, the transition of re-understanding of what wealth is. That wealth comes from an inner space, in a reality sense. It's not just words to make you do good things, but and then how do we translate that redefinition of wealth into stewardship or reciprocity understandings of our linkage or place within the earth? And I think that's where the traditional knowledge base really starts to shine, and then the fun starts.
Yes, and I think that the more and more human beings learn about spiritual knowledge, the more interesting the world becomes, and the more physically healthier, happier people become. And it's the spiritual knowledge and the spiritual practices have very biological impacts on the body and on other people's bodies as well. And Western science is just now beginning to confirm, that there is power, and it's not just some kind of superstition when indigenous people dance or when we chant, that there are real transformative things that are happening within the very molecules on the atomic level of the basis of this material universe can be impacted through our thoughts and through our words and our intention. So, again, if we all center ourselves and become spiritually aware, I believe that will impact the whole entire universe. And I'm hoping that is the change. We can write declarations, but really what we need is a spiritual revolution, transformation for all of us, so that we can all
well, I think that's
well.
that's evident here. It's sort of like a smile. When someone smiles at you, that just changes your being. And if someone, sort of barks at you, that has an impact as well. So, there's what do they say? Smile, it adds to your face value. Kind of scenario. At some point, we're going to get Manny over here to come jump in and join us, because, the one thing is that's kind of like a foundation. How much of that kind of thought was embodied within the work that you folks just came from?
I think that, if you... it's very common when you go to an indigenous meeting or indigenous gathering of any sort that it begins with a prayer. And Ophelia Reves was kind enough to give us a traditional prayer, as well as sing us a sacred song. So so that energy was imbued within the meeting, within the working group that we had here at the conference. And I hope that will shine through in the declaration.
Well, I think that brings just to say those words, and I think that's the one thing that Ophelia mentioned, that she knows her language, shine through. And I think if we begin to recognize the sort of holographic world that we live in, that we can appreciate light moving through things.
Absolutely.
and the transition that thought and intention.
Yesterday we had the first day of the working group, and we were so busy, and it was so everybody was so excited that we actually forgot to reserve the sacred space at the beginning. We didn't have the prayer, and the meeting was quite hectic yesterday, and so today we were talking. We said, we need to have the prayer beforehand, and the whole the whole event, the whole day, how we organized and worked with one another, how people treated one another, was much different than the day before. And I think it was because, to begin with, we all put our hearts and our minds into a calm and centered place before we began our work, and it made all of the difference.
Well, one of the things is someone was speaking about Evo Morales and his courage to stand forward, and it was also mentioned that, well, it's basically, we're all manifestations of the earth, and if we give the earth a moment to let that energy move through us, rather than, thinking that we are doing something, it's a completely different paradigm or point of view.
Right. Well, that's many indigenous peoples, the name of the people are the people of the earth. Many indigenous peoples throughout the world, their name is the people of the earth. For Navajo, we're the people of the earth. Nahoka Diendene, the same with Tana Autumn. And so there's no separation or distinction from ourselves and the earth. And I think that, especially I was raised in a Western world in America, and I'm still, indigenous, but sometimes I forget how connected everything is, and sometimes I get caught up in the illusion of duality and separation. And I have to actively work to remind myself and remain aware and conscious that that's not true, that we are intimately, fundamentally connected on so many levels, the physical, the energetic, spiritual levels. And that's the consciousness and awareness that traditional elders maintain. They're the priests, if you will, of our people, and they maintain that space of awareness and consciousness through dedication and active practice of the spiritual practices, chanting, prayer, song, dance, these things. And so they are able to maintain that awareness and consciousness that we are all connected. And so as a youth, that's how my grandmother is, and as a young person, that's what I would like to become as I get older. I would like to be like her, and be able to pray as sincerely as she does. And for Navajo, we say hajon, we say walking in beauty, and my grandmother is, to me, the epitome of a person who walks in beauty. And
well, that's really
that's
sweet.
Something that that's something that I hope to be able to do as I get older, and I wish more people
had that
experience.
Yeah.
But that's
Yeah.
my grandmother, and she's really the inspiration for all of the work that I do, and she embodies all of that beauty.
While you were talking, I got tears in my eyes, actually. That's the growing your own food, I think, is really a fascinating thing. If you ever spend at least 3 or 4 months growing your own food and eating only the food that you grow, one day you'll walk out and you'll go to eat something out of the garden, and you'll realize that you are the active voice of the earth that you're standing on. And it's an incredible experience, because all of a sudden you realize your whole body is coming from the dirt that you're standing on, and that the voice that's coming out of your mouth is that of the earth itself. And it's a phenomenal...
Oh yeah, and if we can, the idea is that if we can all maintain that awareness, because sometimes, we have moments where we're like, these epiphanies, if you will, and you really feel the moment within your body that you're connected to everyone in the earth, and if we can just maintain as often as we can, or extend those moments of awareness and connection, then we become powerful people, because we become connected and happy. It brings joy to have those things.
Yeah, well, and that brings up diet. traditional foods, and how a culture can be totally, broken apart if you're not allowed to have your traditional foods and your traditional medicines, because they are an integral part of the consciousness of the earth. They're within the macrobiotic process or studies. You don't eat anything that's over 50 miles away from where you are, because then you stop resonating with the earth energy that's there. And if that's where you are, then, so these days with food coming from 3,000 miles away and the impacts on global warming because of all of that, it's like everyone's so totally scattered, because the ground means that, you're part of 100 different bioregions and watersheds and all of that. And how can you find stability in that kind of consciousness? So anyway, I was just kind of curious if those kind of issues sort of came up, and I don't think Manny's ever going to join us. So
oh, he's coming. He's coming.
He's a very busy man, very important person here.
We spoke of, as always, when you go to these meetings, we speak of the human rights, we speak of indigenous peoples' rights to their lands, territories, and resources, and we also, are critical of false solutions to climate change, particularly the development of nuclear power and the development of nuclear energy, which is detrimental not only to this planet and the future generations, but to indigenous peoples. As you know, I'm sure Navajo Nation is home to one of the largest deposits of uranium in the world, especially at least in the United States. So we understand, the vicious, brutal cost that uranium mining has to our physical bodies, which have endured cancer, our land, which has been contaminated. So nuclear power and nuclear energy is absolutely not a solution, and no one should cash in on climate change, the climate crisis. People are trying to cash in on the crisis, on the disaster. Naomi Klein writes eloquently about disaster capitalism. When there's a disaster, people and corporations move in to make the money, and that's exactly what's happening with the climate crisis. There's a crisis, people are scared, they want some kind of solution, and out of that fear, people are susceptible to believing false solutions that are provided by states and corporations, particularly the carbon credit market.
Oh my goodness!
That one in particular, and nuclear development,
Yep.
nuclear power. And both of those have very real and dire consequences on the survival of indigenous peoples today throughout the world.
The legacy mine issue. I mean, the fact that nothing has been cleaned up since the whole nuclear thing started. There's still no place to put the waste, and the what's been going on with the war machine and using this depleted uranium, the impacts that are not understood. It's just phenomenal with all of that, those impacts, and the fact that we would even consider. With that church rock, I don't know if a lot of folks even know about that. We had a uranium summit at the base of Bear Butte, or Red Butte, with the Havasupai just a few months ago. I think it was a few months ago, last summer. And the stories, houses being built with from the tailings.
Yes.
And the fact that they let that kind of stuff happen.
Well, I mean, it's the construction of indigenous peoples as being worth less than other human bodies. And that's the consequence of racism. When you dehumanize an entire peoples, when you pretend that the people are vanishing, then people allow themselves to justify and or ignore the suffering that happens to people. And indigenous people have suffered greatly on account of racism. So, and I attribute, environmental racism. There's a reason why they come to our land to engage in those types of development and extraction, not only because we're vulnerable, because if you look at the socioeconomic indicators on with most indigenous peoples or reservation, education attainment is low, employment is low, opportunity is scarce for many indigenous folks. So we're in a very vulnerable position, and at times it can be hard to defend yourself when you're in that position, because you don't have political power. You don't have, $1 million, $2 million, even $1,000 to give to a lawyer to help you. So indigenous peoples have to work very hard, and we have always worked very hard, and we continue to work very hard to protect our land and our people. And the struggle continues as it is today.
And here we are in Bolivia, and we're speaking with...
Michelle.
And are you working with any specific organizations these
No,
days?
yes and no. I'm a youth representative for the Indigenous Alliance Without Borders, and I've worked with Jose Matus, the director, which is an indigenous organization that campaigns around issues of human rights on the U.S.-Mexico border, particularly with traditional mobility of the indigenous peoples to cross the border. Of course, the actual construction of the wall on indigenous lands, as well as the violence and the militarization of the wall, and how that impacts indigenous peoples specifically. So he champions that work, as does Ophelia Reves, and they've been doing it for quite a long time. And it's a privilege and an honor to be able to help them in any way that I can.
And once again, the name of the organization and the website.
It's the Indigenous Alliance Without Borders, or Indígenas Alliance Sin Fronteras. And a Google search will bring that up immediately. Yeah.
All right. So a little bit about you. What have you been up to, and what are your plans?
Oh, well, for the past year, I've been completing my Fulbright Fellowship in New Zealand, and I've been at the University of Waikato, which is in Tainui land, which is one of the large iwis, or large tribe isn't the best word, they say iwis to distinguish themselves. So it's on Tainui land, and I've been there writing my thesis, which was called Restoring Indigenous Legal Systems and Peacemaking Traditions.
Whoa. Well, can you give us a little insight into, because, the conflict resolution issue, I think the comments that you made, leave your egos at the door, the fact that we need to have a mechanism developed. There's a thought going through the whole idea of getting people that are guilty of environmental rape, I guess, actually prosecuted somehow, or actually to acknowledge that it's unacceptable. There are unacceptable ways of doing some of these things. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your thesis.
Oh, well, the thesis has been quite a long journey. I've been basically for a year, been in a room researching and typing, so I haven't been public. I haven't really been to conferences. I've kind of almost would say taken a sabbatical from a lot of activities that I'm normally doing or have done. But it's been really excellent opportunity that I was given. Basically, I guess I believe the thesis argues that indigenous peoples' traditional knowledge and ancient wisdom has the potential to transform not only our own ourselves and how we relate to the world, but also it can change the whole world, because indigenous wisdom, particularly through custom law, shows us alternative ways of being human, which are more just and sustainable. And so it's important to discover those systems that exist. Discover those systems that are ancient, that are sustainable, that practice gender complementarity, that practice peace and nonviolence consensus, and learn how we can use those principles within our lives today.
Well, at the U.S. Social Forum in Atlanta, Georgia, a couple years ago, Cherokee grandmother opened up the event with a ceremonial kind of thing, and one of her statements was that her village tribe, they didn't have prisons, that their sense of if someone was acting out of line, it was actually seen as a dysfunction of the community, which was a really interesting way to kind of look at things, is that it's everybody's responsibility that something's going wrong. And so that person is sort of like the messenger of a dysfunction that needed to be identified.
I think with my thesis, which I found was that throughout the world, indigenous peoples are incarcerated at a rate that is overwhelming in comparison to the numbers of indigenous peoples. In New Zealand, Maori men make up 50% of the prison population, although they're only 12.5% of the total population. In Maori, women make up 60% of the total prison population. The same is true in the United States, and the same is true in Australia with the indigenous peoples there. So as a result of, historic discrimination and, discrepancies, poverty, education, all these different issues, indigenous peoples are quite vulnerable. And I would even argue that part of that incarceration is another way to dispossess indigenous peoples from their lands and their cultures. I think it's just another way. It's ethnocide. And so that's why it's so important for indigenous peoples in the world really to look at what do we mean by justice, what do we mean by law, and how do we
Right, is
find
just us?
Yeah, how do we find a justice that does not involve locking
Retaliatory
people in prison or
actions
punishing
when
them.
the social fabric is dysfunctional.
Yes.
I think that's one of the issues. Well, thank you so much for joining us,
Thank you so
and I hope the next couple days we'll see a little bit more of you. Once again, we're speaking with,
Michelle Cook.
and do you have any websites that you're working with specific?
No.
Okay, we look forward to seeing your master's thesis.
Oh, well, we'll see. It's just the first step in a very long journey. So
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And you want to jump in that seat, Manny? And you want to come? You want to just step in real quick and give us an update? You're about what you're doing. I even yeah, maybe I should, and that way she can get out of here. And I know you're busy too. And
I even cut that short.
oh, I'm sorry.
just gonna go to the restroom and I'll be
Okay,
with you.
okay. All right. Yeah, go ahead. Come, just sit down here for a second.
My friends from Kausaya told me that.
Okay, one second. I'm gonna hit a stop button.